Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to share some incredibly intense and frankly terrifying true stories. These all come from people who found themselves in extremely isolated situations out in the wild. What started as, camping trips or time spent outdoors, well, they turned into desperate struggles for survival. We're talking about implied threats, chilling violence, and some things that are just completely unexplained.
Yeah, these accounts really highlight human vulnerability. What happens when you're miles from anywhere the usual rules don't apply, and an encounter becomes almost primal. We'll look at different kinds of threats today: predatory attacks, disturbing domestic violence spilling over, and even encounters that seem to verge on the paranormal.
Okay, let's get right into it. Our first story happened back in March 2003, deep in the Los Padres National Forest. It involves two brothers, one 17 and his younger sibling. They were out for a 2-night camping trip, totally alone, at a remote spot called the Gorge. Getting there wasn't easy. It was a 5-mile hike. The place was known, apparently, for this 50-foot cliff jump into the water below.
And that isolation is key, isn't it? They went there for the adventure, maybe the quiet, but it also meant they were completely cut off. No easy way to get help. Plus, that jump itself. Even in daylight, it sounds like it was risky. You needed to know exactly where to land.
Exactly. So they set up their camp, got a fire going, the usual stuff. They fell asleep. Then, around 2:30 in the morning, they're jolted awake by this massive splash, a really loud, wet sound that completely put out their campfire. The older brother, terrified, figures it out almost instantly. Their 2-gallon water bladder, someone had sliced it open and just chucked it onto the fire.
Wow. Just the act of putting out their only light source like that, it's immediately intimidating, creates total darkness and disorientation.
Right. And the silence after that splash must have been awful. When his eyes adjusted, he saw them. 4 large men just sitting there by the dead fire pit. He said they were expressionless, seemed drunk, wearing dark hoodies and jeans. But the really chilling part, 2 of them were holding these weapons, homemade primitive things. He described them as thick, sort of like swords or machetes.
That changes everything, doesn't it? It's not just drunk stumbling into camp. The weapons signal intent, a serious physical threat. And the lack of immediate violence is almost worse. They didn't just attack, they sat there. Then the implied threat, forcing the brothers to walk.
Yeah, the narrator immediately thought about local rumors, drug dealers, maybe cartel folks using the remote areas to hide crops. He feared these guys were connected to something dangerous like that.
It feels calculated. Extinguishing the fire, the weapons, controlling their movement. It's not random.
They were totally trapped. The men made them walk. The younger brother started hyperventilating, crying, realizing where they were being taken, back to the top of that 60-foot cliff jumping spot.
Oh, no.
The men formed this sort of semicircle around them, and then they told the boys to jump. Said they had to prove they weren't. Well, they used a crude term, essentially calling them cowards.
That's just sadistic, knowing how dangerous, likely fatal that jump would be at night with hidden rocks below.
The older brother knew it. He pleaded with them, tried to reason with them, explaining how deadly it was in the dark.
But it wasn't about reason, was it? It was a power play. A death sentence disguised as some kind of twisted dare. They wanted to watch. That's what isolation can do. It removes the normal checks on cruelty. It becomes a horrifying spectator sport for the aggressors.
In that absolute moment of terror, the older brother realized pleading was useless.
Yeah.
He had to act. He remembered the safe angle from jumping before. He told his terrified brother exactly what to do. Jump out as far as possible and angle slightly to the right to miss the worst of the submerged rocks. Then they jumped, together. He described the fall as feeling like a minute long, just filled with screams. The younger brother hit something on the way down, slammed his arm against a rock, ended up with a really deep gash, dislocated shoulder.
Just horrific. But they survived the fall.
They did. But it wasn't over. As they surfaced, sputtering in the pitch-black water, the men started throwing things down at them from the cliff edge. Heavy objects, bottles, rocks splashing near them, trying to hit them as they swam desperately for the opposite shore.
Unbelievable cruelty, kicking them when they're down, literally.
They somehow made it to the bank, scrambled away into the darkness, and just kept going until morning, when they finally reached safety. But here's something that adds another layer of horror, something the narrator only found out 7 years later. He read a news article about 2 other teenage boys found dead that same week at the bottom of that same gorge jumping spot.
Oh, God.
They were from a school group the brothers had actually briefly seen earlier that weekend. And the article mentioned their camp had also been invaded by men carrying, quote, similar machete-like objects.
So it wasn't random. These weren't just some drunk guys. They were likely serial predators, maybe even killers, using that spot. That retroactive discovery, it must reframe the entire experience. Knowing they didn't just escape a bad encounter, they escaped murderers who likely succeeded with others just days later.
Yeah. Survival feels less like skill and more sheer terrifying luck in that context. Okay, let's shift gears now. It's a tough transition, but necessary. We're moving from that kind of external predatory violence to something perhaps even colder, calculated malice born from within a family. This next story takes place on a family farm about 25 years ago.
Right. This touches on what you might call relational isolation. Sometimes the closed environment of a family or a very small community allows dark feelings and intentions to fester unchecked until they just explode. The story centers on an aunt who was childless and her husband. The husband had been having a long affair with a worker on the farm, and that affair had resulted in a secret child, a little girl who was 2 years old at the time of the events.
And the catalyst, the thing that broke everything open, was the husband's decision. He decided he wanted to marry the mistress. He planned to give the daughter his name officially, legitimize her.
And the aunt's reaction to this news. The source describes her as unstable, maybe obsessive. She didn't just get angry, she planned.
She hired professional killers, hitmen. The source used a specific term, rhosis. Her instructions were chillingly clear. Kill everyone in the mistress's home during the night.
And this is where you see a disturbing line drawn. The hitmen carried out part of the contract. They went to the hut and killed the mistress, her sister, her mother, and her father. But apparently, they refused to harm the 2-year-old child. Even professional killers, it seems, had a limit. They wouldn't kill the toddler.
So what did the aunt do? Learning the child was still alive? Because the hired killers wouldn't finish the job she wanted specifically done, she drove to the scene herself, found the 2-year-old girl asleep, and she personally strangled the child.
It's just profoundly disturbing. It shows her motive wasn't just revenge, it was annihilation, especially focused on the child who represented the rival lineage, the threat to her own position. She didn't just want them gone, she seemingly needed to be the one to extinguish that specific life when her tools, the hitmen, refused.
She was eventually caught, convicted, and got a life sentence. The whole ordeal, the trial.
Yeah.
It apparently cost the family almost everything they had.
Your complete devastation, ripple effects far beyond the initial crime.
But the reason this is being shared now, what makes it so immediate and terrifying for the person telling the story, is that the aunt is scheduled for release from prison this September, as in just a couple of months from now.
Wow, after all this time.
And apparently she's expressed an interest, a keen interest, in meeting the narrator, the reason given, because the narrator physically resembles her.
That is deeply unsettling. The horror isn't just a historical event anymore. It's the imminent return of someone who is proving capable of such cold, calculated personal violence. And that connection, the resemblance, it makes the potential contact feel incredibly threatening. The isolation of the past is about to be broken by the return of the source of the terror.
It turns a dark family secret into a looming present-day threat. Okay, one more story for today. This one takes us into a different kind of fear altogether. It mixes isolation with something, well, something truly inexplicable. We're going to Queensland, Australia. Think vast, remote bushland. The story comes from someone who was 12 years old at the time, camping out with friends in a dry riverbed. You know, kind of a typical thing for kids that age, maybe pushing boundaries. It was actually their first time trying alcohol together, out in the middle of nowhere. The setting itself was a bit unnerving. One bank of the riverbed was described as impossibly steep, like a high wall looming over them.
So, already a bit on edge, perhaps. Young kids, first time drinking, isolated spot.
Exactly. And then the first strange thing happens. A man appears up on that steep bank. He's described as bearded, wearing ragged clothes, no shoes. He just stands there, staring down at them, silently, for about 5 minutes. Then he just melts back into the bush.
Okay, that's weird. Creepy, definitely. A local eccentric, maybe. But dismissible, perhaps.
Maybe. But later that night, he comes back. This time, he doesn't stay on the bank. He walks down right into their campsite, just stands there among them, by their fire. Again, total silence. The boys are, understandably, freaked out.
Yeah, that crosses a line. Standing in their camp, that's an invasion.
After a few minutes of this unbearable silence, one of the friends tries to, break the ice. Says something simple like, "G'day, mate, how are you?" The man just stares at him, wide-eyed. Doesn't say anything for what felt like 2 whole minutes. Then he leans in and whispers. The narrator said it was more like a hiss he hissed That's none of your fucking business.
Whoa. Okay, definitely not friendly. That's aggressive, threatening.
And then it gets even weirder. He suddenly lets out this loud scream, but he screams at the fire, just yells at the flames. Then he turns and runs, back up that impossibly steep riverbank. The narrator says he scaled it in record time like it was nothing.
Speed up an impossible incline that pushes it beyond just a weirdo in the woods, doesn't it? That detail adds a layer of unnaturalness. How do you even process that? It's not just scary, it's confusing. It doesn't fit normal parameters.
Right. The boys were absolutely terrified. They stayed up for ages, built the fire up high, too scared to sleep properly. Eventually, exhaustion must have taken over, and they dozed off. But the real shock came when they woke up in the morning.
What happened?
Everything was gone.
Like robbed.
Completely. Their alcohol, obviously, but also their bags, their shoes, their blankets, everything they had brought with them. Cleaned out while they slept.
Okay, so he came back again, silently, and robbed them. Still terrifying, but at least somewhat explainable, maybe?
Here's the part that makes it truly baffling.
Yeah.
The ground where they were sleeping, it was dampish sand. Perfect for leaving footprints, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You'd see tracks everywhere. Theirs, his.
There were none. Absolutely zero footprints anywhere. Not leading into the camp, not leading out, not even their own footprints from the night before. The narrator said it looked impossibly like no one had ever been there at all.
Wait, no footprints, not even their own. That's not possible. How? So
Yeah.
The theft itself is secondary. The real violation is the complete lack of physical evidence. It's like the entire encounter, the intruder himself, existed outside of normal physical laws. That leaves you with a profound sense of unease. It wasn't just a man, it was something else, something untraceable, unknowable.
We've definitely covered some really disturbing ground today. 3 stories, 3 very different kinds of terror. You had the immediate life or death predatory attack at the gorge, then the chillingly personal, calculated violence stemming from the family situation with the aunt, and finally this deeply unsettling, almost reality-bending violation at the Queensland bush camp.
And the common thread, really, through all of them is isolation. It acted like an amplifier in each case. For the brothers at the gorge, it removed consequences for the attackers, letting them turn violence into a game. For the aunt, the closed family system let her rage build until it became murderous action away from wider scrutiny. And Queensland, that isolation left the boys completely exposed to something unknown, something that could seemingly operate outside the rules of reality and leave no trace.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We often focus on the physical act of violence, the confrontation itself. But sometimes the deepest trauma comes from the implication. The fact that an attack was totally random, unprovoked. Or, like in that last story, the sheer impossibility of it. The fact that the attacker was untraceable, maybe even unreal in some sense. How does the mind even cope with that kind of fear, the fear of something that leaves no footprints?
That lack of motive, or the defiance of physics, it challenges our fundamental understanding of safety and reality. It's a terrifying thought to be left with.
It really is. Well, that's all the time we have for this particular deep dive into these unsettling encounters. Thank you for joining us.
We hope this gave you something to think about regarding vulnerability, isolation, and the different faces fear can wear.
If you found this story compelling, please do us a favor. Like this video, share it with someone who appreciates true horror stories, and definitely subscribe to our channel, Horror Docs, for more content like this. We'll catch you on the next one.